great, and today you see him, Boston Red Sox fans' worst nightmare, three-time All-Star. And we got to throw in the World Series MVP because we're going back a little bit in time. The man they call Bucky effin' Dent. That's what the Red Sox say, Mr. Bucky Dent. How you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great, and I love that intro. I love that nickname they gave me, and I'm looking forward to having a great talk with you.
I'm looking forward to it too. And everyone remembers that 1978 game. Walk me through it. It was a day game too, right?
I played in the daytime. What happened was we lost on Sunday,
Mhm.
and we lost a coin flip, and we had to go to Boston. And I can honestly say, at all my career, that game was the most pressure game I ever played in. But it was a tremendous game. It was played on a Jewish holiday in the
Rush.
afternoon, and the whole world seemed to shut down to watch that game. I mean, there's not too many days go by where a Red Sox fan will say, "Hey, you ruined my life," or a Yankee fan goes, "I remember where I was at." It was a special game, and I'm just thrilled and honored that I had a chance to be a part of a historic game like that.
Yeah. And at Rosh Hashanah, kids were off, everyone was tuned in. I talked to my dad before this podcast. I was like, I have Bucky Dent. He was like, I was in college. I watched that game. So, obviously one hell of a game and one hell of a hit. Stepping up to the plate, what was going through your mind? I mean, you talk about the pressure, and, I watched some videos of that game where your teammates are talking about this was a high pressure game. There's no doubt about it. Like you mentioned, even just in regular stepping up in a playoff game, what's going through your mind before a pitch?
Well, what was going through my mind was I had fouled the ball off my foot
Yep,
before,
I saw that.
and I didn't wear my guard, and so I went back and put the spray on, and we only had 24 guys that day. Willie was out with a hamstring pull, and they had already pinched it for Brian Doyle, so I knew that I had to play. So when I went back, I kind of got a chance to reset, and Mickey told me that I was using the wrong bat, that I broke one in batting practice, and I was using his bat. And as I started back to the plate, the bat boy said, "Hey, you got the wrong bat." So he gave me the bat, and Mickey said, "This, the other one was cracked." So he gave it to me, and I really wasn't thinking anything other than we're down, 2-0, and we got runners at first and second, and I just need to get a base hit somewhere. I just need to drive in a run. And when I got back in the box, that's what I was thinking. I need to hit a ball hard someplace and drive in a run. And Mike Torres had been throwing me fastballs in, sliders away. So when I got back in the box, he tried to run a fastball in on me, and I was a pretty good low ball hitter. And I hit it pretty good, but I didn't know if it was high enough to go over the wall. And there was a shadow. So I was running hard to get to second base. And when I rounded first, I saw they had signaled that it was a home run. And I looked and I saw Yastrzemski buckled at the wall. I rounded second base, rounded third base. Fenway was dead quiet, man. I mean, everybody was in shock. I think they all passed out. And when I got to home plate, then I saw, I heard the Yankee fans, a sprinkling of them, and everybody came out of the dugout. And, everybody asked me, "Well, what are you thinking?" I said, "The only thing I'm thinking is we're ahead. You
Mhm.
know, we're ahead 3-2, but we got three more innings in Fenway, and anything can happen because they had a really good lineup."
Yeah, 100%. In those games, division games back in the days, currently anything can happen. And we had Chris Jenkins on the podcast. I'm not sure if you know him, if you follow college basketball. He's the guy from Villanova who hit that game-winning shot against UNC that went down in history. You're now part of history with that hit. Looking back at it, what did you learn about yourself about pressure and preparation and opportunity in general?
Well, I learned that if you prepare for it, it doesn't become bigger than what it is. And, over my career, um, playing sports, I was fortunate enough to be in big moments, and it taught me a lot, in those moments, even though they weren't as big as playing in a one game playoff, Yankee, New York, Boston, New York. but it still taught me about pressure and, how to deal with pressure. And so when you get in those situations, I wasn't really thinking about all the pressure. I was just thinking about what I had to do, my job. You know, my focus was on just getting a good pitch and hitting it. I didn't think about trying to hit a home run or any of that. I just tried to, you know, keep myself calm and think about what I had to do. And that's what I tried to do.
And kind of the main subject of what we talked about is pressure and being in New York City, being on the Yankees. I mean, you are, it's the face of MLB. It's the Yankees. How did you handle pressure from, the outside critics and from fans in general?
Well, I was lucky.
Hmm.
I played in a big city, Chicago, and I learned how to deal with all of that. When I was a rookie, when I came up in '73, playing in Chicago, it's a great city. It's a great sports town, but they're very demanding people like New York, and I learned how to deal with the press there, and I learned how to deal with the pressure of the Chicago fans. If you didn't play well, they booed you. If you played well, they cheered you. So when I moved over to New York, I was able to just move right in and understand what it was. What I heard about, playing for George Steinbrenner, um, you know, not until I got there and started playing did I understand what all that meant. That he was a very demanding owner. He expected you to play a certain way, to wear a uniform a certain way, and he would call you out if you didn't. So that made it a little bit more stressful, but it was fun. I love playing in New York. I love playing with the guys that I played with. The 77, 78 Yankees were two of the teams that I just loved playing with, and they dealt with the pressure of all that unbelievable. Off the field, there was a lot of things that went on, but it never affected them when they went between the lines. They were a group that were champions. A lot of them had won world championships, and they'd been there. They were there the year before in '76 when I came over in '77. So they all learned how to deal with that and kind of deflect it.
And obviously George Steinbrenner, one of the best to do it. What was that relationship like with you and George, kind of behind the scenes? What was that all like?
Well, as a player, I didn't have to deal with him as much. I mean, like I said, as long as you did your job, he didn't bother, but he expected you to do certain things. When I became a manager, it became different. When I played, I only had to worry about myself.
Yeah.
But when I was a manager, I had to worry about everybody else, and then I had to deal with him, as far as, but I didn't have any really, maybe one incident or two incidents where, we kind of got into it a little bit, but, I knew when I took the job, because I played there and saw what all the other managers, I kind of knew the ground rules. Um, the one thing that I did talk to him about before I took the job was that I was a AAA manager. I knew that we were thin in the minor leagues and it was going to take a while, and he had to be patient to rebuild the organization. And if he wasn't, then I really didn't want to take the job. But he says, no, we're going to be patient. We need to do this. Well, it didn't last very long, but I'll never say anything negative about it. I enjoyed him. I loved playing for him. He was a guy that, you know, like I said, the ground rules were, the bottom line was to win, and that was it. He didn't want no excuses or anything.
Yes, and you mentioned about your coaching, and you've kind of done it all: managed, coached, mentored. Um, you are a role model to these younger players who are getting into the league, coming from the minors. What lessons do you pass down to these guys? Obviously, when you're a coach, when you're a manager, when you're a mentor, what are you telling these young guys getting into the league?
Well, I started a baseball school, so I wanted to give back to the kids. We didn't have anything growing up, where we could go to a baseball school. So that was one of my big goals. And I did it for 33 years. And so I had a lot of teaching, ability. And so when I went to the minor leagues, being a minor league manager with the Yankees, I still, had to deal with George in certain situations with players when I got to AAA and stuff like that. But the one thing that I always try to emphasize to them is, I had some great coaches with me. Hoyt Wilhelm, I had Frank Howard one year, I had Bill Momboquette, Kenny Rowe. I had professional guys. And what we tried to do was, first of all, we wanted to make sure that they understand that the game was fun and that we wanted them to play it the right way. And there's a certain way to play it. And we tried to make them understand what it was going to take to play in New York. The pressure, the things that we were talking about, the media. So we tried to make them understand that, that, hey, it's demanding. We're going to be demanding here because it's going to be real demanding when you get to New York. So, and we tried to, really stress the fundamentals and the mental side of being tough, and winning. We wanted to develop winning players. So it was a whole process, but I thoroughly enjoyed doing what I did, and I loved it.
And I saw you had a school. Did you have a replica of Fenway Park in that school? Was that?
We did. We did.
Okay.
And we called the owner of the Boston Red Sox, and we told them what we were going to do, and they blessed it. So we built this little Fenway, and it was one of the highlights for the kids. We let everybody try to play in there, and experience what I experienced. Stand at the plate, see the wall, kind of visualize and kind of, hey, this is the moment, trying to hit a ball over the wall into the screen. We try to make it fun for them and kind of give them that feeling of what it was like.
Yeah. And kind of this next question, it's a deep question. And I always love to ask this, how do you want people to remember you, Bucky Dent, in a 3-term thing, the player, the competitor, and the person, because, you have so much going on. How do you want to be remembered? What's your legacy?
Well, I want them to remember me as the person because, as a player, that kind of goes away. But, sports, baseball, all athletes, sports it gives a platform for us to give back, and, I grew up from a family that was kind of torn apart. I was raised in Florida, and, some of the things that might not be important to me, like, winning the most valuable player, that was important. But I think growing up and having the city that I grew up in, having a park named after me, that's very valuable because that's what I grew up in. And, I want people to remember me that I gave back. I ran a charity for 33 years. I had a baseball school, and I wanted to be able to give back to the community and give back to the people. And those were very, very important things to me, and they still are today.
Yeah, 100%. And that's such an honor. And, I want to ask my favorite question right out of the bat. And this is one of the reasons why I reached out, because, you came from some hardship and you conquered, you overcame, and you became who you are today. What would your biggest underdog moment be in your career, in life? It can be either or, where odds were stacked against you, Bucky, and you just overcame it and proved some people wrong.
Well, my biggest underdog moment probably would be the home run because I wasn't a home run hitter, and I tell the story all the time. I probably wouldn't have hit if Billy Martin was the manager because he used to pinch hit for me all the time. He would have had to make a decision like Bob Lemon did. Do I pinch hit for Brian Doyle or am I going to pinch hit for my shortstop? So that big moment right there was my underdog moment because it taught me a lot. It taught me that going back to the days when I was growing up and I didn't know where I was going to live from home to home, and going back to where I picked cotton and planted tobacco, that moment was the moment for me because, it solidified everything that I worked for my whole life. People telling you you're too small, you don't run fast enough, you don't have a great arm, you don't do this. And to be in that moment and have a nickname after me now, I got a name, and to be remembered because of that moment. I'll never forget that after it was all over, the home run, playoffs, World Series, became the most valuable player. I went home, and one of my dearest friends called me on the phone, and he says, "You know, Bucky," he says, "that home run's going to change your life." I didn't know what he was talking about. I said, "Get out of here, Joe." And here we are 47 years later, and people still talk about that moment. So that's probably the biggest underdog moment of my life.
Wow. And it's almost like, well, everything happens for a reason. You worked your behind off. You grinded. You didn't sleep at night. You were training. You were doing everything a pro athlete did. Your moment came, and it couldn't happen to a better person. And wow.
Well,
And
I think that I really thank you for those comments, but I think what it teaches is that God has truly blessed me, and He fulfilled every one of my dreams. And what I tell kids, at my school, I says, you got to dream big,
yeah,
but then you have to work for it. You have to go out and you have to work hard. You have to have fun at what you're doing, and day in and day out. If you keep doing those things, you're going to be successful, wherever it's going to be in baseball or in life, and those are the things we tried to teach at the school, that everybody's not going to be a professional baseball player, but that doesn't mean you can go on and be successful in some other, thing that you want to do with your life. So, those are the things that we tried to pass on, to the kids, and it was a lot of fun doing it.
and something you mentioned is it's more than the sport. You're Bucky Dent. You're an amazing human who's given back to the community. How has baseball kind of shaped you into the man you are off the field? What have you learned from baseball that's, you know, obviously you created a charity from baseball, you give back, but what else have you kind of learned from playing the sport that you love?
It taught me discipline. It taught me work ethic. It taught me humility. It taught me an awful lot. It taught me about failure, how to overcome failure. It taught me um, great moments. So sports does an awful lot for you. On and off the field. It kind of grooms your character, so to speak.
Yeah. It just happens to be the sport we love in baseball, and man, and just looking at the current game, obviously, um, going to the Yankees first and foremost, obviously. What makes the Yankees so timeless and special? Obviously, I know it's a historic team, but you played for them. What makes the New York Yankees the New York Yankees? What's the fan base, the city, but what else makes the Yankees the Yankees?
When I was 10 years old, we used to watch the games on TV because the World Series was played during the daytime, and we got to watch them. Mickey Mantle was my hero.
Wow.
And that NY on that uniform just captured me. And from that time on, I was a New York Yankee nut. I wanted to play for the Yankees so bad. Their tradition, all the great players, going back. I think when I started watching them, they were in, what, they won 5, lost 1, and won 5 more. They were on every year, and they were historic. They were bigger than life. And, I followed them all the way. And then when I got the chance to play with them and put that uniform on and play in front of the crowds and win world championships, you understand what makes them so historic and legendary. Is the first time I walked into the locker room, um, you could feel you. I always use it as they always told me there were ghosts in there, but you could feel those guys, Lou Gehrig, Babe Ruth, it was like they were there. And that's what made it so amazing to put that uniform on and to play. And then the crowds, the Yankee crowds, I'll never forget in 77 with 1 out or 2 outs in the 9th inning, Torres is pitching, Reggie had already hit 3 home runs. The crowd was electric and the stadium was shaking. And this is what you dream of, hey, I'm in this moment and I'm going to be a world champion, and that's what makes it all worthwhile.
And I think you hit the nail on the dot. It's like the Celtics or the Lakers.
Mm-hmm.
It's a staple team. It's got the legacy. It's got the history. It's got the fans. It's everything you can dream of for a sports team, and it's so incredible. And obviously, looking at today's game, the Yankees are still doing what the Yankees do, so nothing's changed there. And that brings me to my next question, Bucky. Looking at the current game from when you played, what has changed in your eyes for better or for worse? Obviously, we've added new rules to the game, but what has changed in your mind, or has gotten worse or better, I should say?
Well, first of all, I love the game of baseball. I love, playing the game of baseball. I think there's some changes that when I came into the league that has really drastically changed. When I came into the league in 73, the DH just came in, but it was the National League and the American League. And, as a young player, you always hear, I played in the American League, you always heard of the great players in the National League. And you got a chance in spring training to play against those guys, to see the Willie Stargells, the Pete Roses, and to play against them, to get a chance to talk to them and stuff like that. But during the season, we didn't. So when you played in the All-Star game, it was a chance to play against the best in the National League, the best in the American League. And that was the mystique about it, and I think that has changed now. The DH has gone away. That's one thing that's really changed. And I think, because of the travel and the divisions that there's no National League anymore. It's all one league. So there's not that mystique anymore of playing against those guys. You had to play against them in the All-Star game or play against them in the World Series. You didn't play against them during the season. So that's one of the biggest changes that I feel in the game that I didn't like. I understand you change with the times and stuff like that. And there's a lot of rules, but between the lines, you still got to pitch it. You still got to hit it. You still got to throw it. They made the bases bigger, and now they got a red flag they toss out, on everything that they want to challenge and stuff like that. But the game itself is still played.
And I read that you played in the American League your whole career, correct?
I played in the American League my whole career, and not till um, I got fired by the Yankees, and then Joe Torre called me, and I really wanted to go to the National League and learn the National League play. And so Joe Torre called me and asked me if I want to coach third base and go to the Cardinals, and another great organization with a history of winning. And I wanted to learn the National League, and I really enjoyed going over there. I got to spend time with a great instructor by the name of George Kissel, just a legend, the godfather of teaching, and spent 4 years with him learning the National League, the integral part of the double switch, this and that. When I coached third base, I had to learn a lot of different things, when Joe was going to pinch hit for somebody. It was just a fun game, and it was played different in the American League because they had the DH, the National League, you had to worry about the pitcher hitting. So I enjoyed that. I really did.
Yeah, it's a completely different game. And if you mind me asking, Bucky, who is your favorite player of all time? It can be current or,
Oh, Mickey Mantle, without
really.
a doubt. He was my hero. I mean, from, like I said, back when I was 9, 10 years old, I got mesmerized by him. And, the first time I met him was in 75 at the All-Star game. Goose Gossage and I made the All-Star team. And we went to a restaurant one night and we're walking in, and we're joking around, and I opened the door and Goose stopped, and I go, "What's the matter?" He goes, "Look." We looked around the corner, and Mickey Mantle and Billy Martin were standing there. And that's the first time I ever had a chance. I was like, "Oh, Mr. Mantle, Bucky Dent," And then when I came over to the Yankees, I was teasing him about that, but he was my hero. I loved watching Mickey Mantle.
Yeah, and mine was I don't know how much you follow current ball, but Adam Jones, center
Hmm.
fielder. We had him on the
Sure.
podcast, and always loved Adam, Big O's guy, and it was I feel you. When I was talking to him, I was Mr. Jones, and shaking, and it's always so awesome to meet the people you look up to as a kid, and then playing with them is a different experience.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like, wow. If you could go back and tell yourself something going into the league, so many years ago, what would that be?
Anything's possible.
Hmm.
Anything's possible. You got to dream big, and you got to work hard, and you got to go after it. And uh, that's what I used to tell kids all the time. Anything's possible. It's out there. You just got to work at it. Put your time in. And just keep working and keep dreaming. And that's what I did.
Yeah. Hard work pays off, and everything
Mm-hmm.
happens for a
Yeah,
reason.
everything.
Couldn't happen to a better person. The final question is, um, what's something people would be surprised about Bucky Dent? And I'm not talking about the player. I'm talking about the person. Again, we talked more. You're so much more than just a player. But what would people be surprised about you as a person?
I think people would surprise. We just had Veterans Day yesterday. That people don't know that I'm a veteran. But
Really?
I served in the military. Yes, I served in the National Guard for 6 years, and I'm honored to say that. And that I'm a diehard Alabama fan. I'm a diehard Alabama football fan.
Wow.
I am nuts on Saturdays when Alabama's playing. Just ask my wife. Don't talk to me. Because I'm a nervous wreck because I'm a big fan.
Wow. Well, thank you for your service, Bucky. And on another note, it's looking good for your team, fourth ranked in the nation. And man, Ty Simpson is something else. And I think you
Yes,
guys
he
have
is.
a great road for this playoffs. But Bucky, it's been an honor and privilege to talk with you and hear about the history that you were a part of. Now, before we go, the floor is yours. Are you doing anything? What are the charities? Where can we find you? We'd love to support you.
Oh, well, I do a bunch of different things. The last charity we've been working with is Swim Across America.
Okay.
Yeah, we got involved in Swim Across America a couple years ago, and we did our first ocean swim in St. Pete about 3 years ago, and I thought I was going to drown. We have to swim 3/4 of a mile, and it was a rough day, and it had a lot of seaweed in the water, and I had a mask and a snorkel on, and the seaweed kept getting in the mask and the snorkel, and I tell you what, it was tough. But we've been helping that charity, and we do a lot of different things. I went to the Munson dinner this year and spoke there, and that was an honor there, and what they're doing, with the boys club and stuff like that is tremendous. So we try to do a lot of different things, try to give back. My park reopened again this past year. They spent $4 million, and I'm totally taken back by that because I grew up in that city of Hialeah, and I remember what the parks meant to me. But the thing about it is they have a couple programs, where, they feed the kids, they give them a place that they can go and just be kids and be safe, and the parents can drop them off. And those kind of things are still important to me. And my wife, Angie, we love living life. We love enjoy traveling and stuff like that. And we love to give back.
And we'll put all those links in the bio. And Bucky, I was going to say you should have gone into swimming, become an Olympian. Seems like you would have done pretty well, sir. And it seems like you would have done well. But we'll put that link to swim to that charity, and please go check that out. And what we'll do is first 10 people to follow Bucky on Instagram, send me a screenshot. We'll get you something special out to you as well. And guys, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, the Yankees legend. Well, I shouldn't say Yankees. He played on multiple teams. The MLB legend himself and the underdog. Out.
Thank you.